Imagine discovering that one of the most practical habits in your weekly routine, the simple act of reheating leftovers, might not be as harmless as it seems. In fact, something you do to save money, avoid waste, and stay organized in your kitchen could quietly be working against your long-term health in ways most people never stop to question. I've had countless conversations with patients who believed they were doing everything right. Cooking at home, storing food properly, reheating meals instead of throwing them away. These are habits we associate with responsibility and care. And yet, when we look a little closer at what happens inside certain foods when they are reheated, especially fried foods, we begin to see a very different picture. My name is Dr. William Collins, and after years of working with adults facing serious health conditions, I've come to understand something that is rarely discussed openly. Some of the risks that build up over time don't come from dramatic, obvious behaviors. They come from small, repeated habits that feel completely normal. Before diving in, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment and feel free to ask questions. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the best health advice from our channel. Together, let's build a healthier, stronger tomorrow. There is one important concept you need to understand. The pancreas is an organ that works quietly. It doesn't complain early. It doesn't send clear warning signals while damage is slowly accumulating. By the time noticeable symptoms appear, the situation is often far more advanced than most people realize. That's part of what makes conditions like pancreatic cancer so difficult. It tends to develop silently. Now, let's talk about something very common: leftover fried food. Think about those fries from last night, or that piece of fried chicken you wrapped carefully and placed in the refrigerator. The next day, reheating it feels like the logical choice. Maybe you use the microwave, or perhaps you heat it again in a pan with a bit of oil to bring back that crispy texture. It feels harmless, familiar, efficient. But here's where things begin to change. Many of the oils commonly used in kitchens, like sunflower, corn, or soybean oil, are sensitive to heat. The first time they are used, they already begin to break down. When they are heated again, especially during reheating, that breakdown becomes more pronounced. The structure of the oil changes, and in that process, certain compounds can form that are not particularly friendly to your body. You don't need to remember complex chemical names to understand the impact. What matters is this: repeated heating can create unstable molecules that contribute to oxidative stress inside the body. Think of it as a kind of internal wear and tear that affects cells over time. When this process happens occasionally, the body can usually manage it. But when it becomes a frequent habit, the burden increases. And here's where it becomes more relevant. Your body responds to these kinds of compounds by activating inflammation as a protective mechanism. Inflammation, in small and temporary doses, is not the enemy. It's part of how your body defends itself. But when it becomes constant, low-grade, and repetitive, it can start to interfere with normal cellular function. Now, consider what happens if reheated fried foods become a regular part of your weekly routine. The body doesn't fully reset between exposures. That inflammatory response can remain active longer than it should. Over time, this creates an environment where cells are under continuous stress. The pancreas, being a sensitive and highly active organ, can be particularly affected by this kind of ongoing strain. It is constantly involved in digestion and metabolic regulation, which means it is already working hard behind the scenes. Adding repeated stressors, especially dietary ones, can make its job even more difficult. Some people begin to notice subtle signs, though they often dismiss them: a sense of heaviness after eating, fatigue that seems to show up after meals, mild discomfort in the upper abdomen that comes and goes. These symptoms are easy to attribute to something minor, like overeating or simple indigestion, and sometimes that's all they are, but sometimes they are worth paying closer attention to. So what can you actually do with this information? It's not about fear, it's about awareness and small adjustments. One of the simplest changes is how you reheat food. Instead of reheating fried items with additional oil, consider using dry heat methods, like an oven or an air fryer. This allows you to restore texture without introducing further breakdown of oils. Another important habit is how you handle cooking oil itself. Reusing oil multiple times might seem economical, but it significantly increases the level of degradation it undergoes. Using oil once and then discarding it may feel wasteful in the moment, but from a health perspective, it's a more cautious approach. At the end of the day, this isn't about eliminating leftovers or creating unnecessary anxiety around food. It's about understanding that certain combinations of habits, especially when repeated consistently over time, can have a bigger impact than we realize. And often, the most meaningful changes don't come from doing something extreme. They come from noticing what's already part of your routine and choosing to do it just a little bit differently. Now, stay with me because what we're about to cover next is where things become even more unexpected. The second food on this list is not something people associate with risk at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It's something that has been praised for decades, recommended by doctors, promoted by nutritionists, celebrated in almost every healthy eating guide you've ever seen. And that's exactly why it catches people off guard. Picture a quiet Sunday evening. You prepare a simple, nourishing dish, sautéed spinach with garlic and olive oil. The kind of meal that makes you feel like you're taking care of your body. The greens are vibrant, soft, and full of flavor. You serve yourself a portion, and the rest goes into a container for the next day. Monday arrives. You open the fridge, take out that same spinach, and reheat it. It looks fine, smells fine, tastes exactly as you remember. Nothing about the experience raises any concern. And yet, beneath that familiar taste, something subtle may have changed. Leafy greens like spinach, kale, or chard naturally contain compounds known as nitrates. On their own, these are not harmful. In fact, they can even play beneficial roles in the body. But once these vegetables are cooked and then left to sit, natural processes begin to unfold. Microorganisms present in the environment can gradually convert those nitrates into nitrites, and when those nitrites are exposed to heat again, they can react with other components in the food to form compounds known as nitrosamines. You don't see them, you don't taste them, but their relevance has been studied extensively, and organizations like the International Agency for Research on Cancer have classified certain nitrosamines as probable carcinogens. What matters here is not fear, but understanding the mechanism. Repeated exposure to compounds that can interfere with normal cellular processes. Think of your DNA as an instruction manual that tells each cell how to function, when to grow, and when to stop. Your body is constantly repairing small errors in that system, but when the same type of disruption happens repeatedly over time, the repair system can become less effective. Not all changes lead to disease, but the cumulative effect is what raises concern. And once these compounds enter the bloodstream, they don't stay in one place. They circulate, they interact. Organs like the pancreas, already sensitive and highly active, are repeatedly exposed to this internal environment. Now, here's the key point. Most people are not doing anything wrong intentionally. Reheating vegetables feels efficient, practical, responsible. That's what makes this habit so common and so overlooked. So, what can you do differently? One simple adjustment is to avoid reheating cooked leafy greens multiple times. Instead, consider eating them cold the next day, added to a salad, mixed into a grain bowl, or wrapped into a meal. The nutrients remain, but you avoid that second heating process. And if you prefer them warm, prepare only the portion you plan to eat in that moment. Small change. Same food, different outcome. Now let's move to the third food, and this one might be the most surprising of all, precisely because it appears so harmless. Rice. There's nothing dramatic about it. No strong smell, no bold flavor. It's one of the most neutral, everyday foods on the planet, and that's exactly why almost no one questions how it's handled after cooking. Imagine a large pot of rice made at the beginning of the week. It sits on the stove, cooling down slowly before being stored. Over the next few days, portions are reheated and eaten without a second thought. This is routine in millions of households. But from the moment that rice begins to cool, a quiet biological process can begin. Raw rice can contain a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. Cooking eliminates the active bacteria, but not necessarily its spores, special survival forms that can withstand heat. Once the rice cools to room temperature, those spores can activate, multiply, and begin producing toxins. Here's the important detail. Some of those toxins are heat stable. That means reheating the rice, even thoroughly, may eliminate live bacteria, but not the toxins already formed. So while the rice appears safe and even tastes completely normal, certain compounds may still be present. Now, this doesn't mean that every reheated plate of rice leads to illness. In many cases, the body handles small exposures without noticeable symptoms, but repeated exposure, especially when rice is left out too long before refrigeration, can contribute to low-grade stress within the digestive system. And this is where the connection becomes important. The gut and the pancreas are closely linked through what researchers often refer to as the gut-pancreas axis. They share communication pathways, blood supply, and inflammatory signaling. When the gut experiences ongoing irritation or imbalance, those signals can extend beyond digestion. Again, this is not about alarm, it's about patterns over time. So how do you reduce the risk without overcomplicating your routine? The solution is surprisingly simple. After cooking rice, cool it quickly, within about an hour. Spread it out rather than leaving it in a dense container, allowing heat to escape faster. Store it in the refrigerator promptly. Ideally, consume it within 24 hours. When reheating, make sure it is steaming hot throughout, and avoid reheating the same portion more than once. These are not complicated rules. They are small adjustments that align your habits with how food actually behaves after cooking. And when you start to look at your routine through that lens, you realize something important. It's not about eliminating foods. It's about understanding them and making decisions that support your body over the long run. Now let's move into the fourth food. And this is where the risk doesn't come from the ingredient itself, but from how it's reheated. This is something almost every household does multiple times a week, and the concern lies in a detail that most people never think about. Picture this. You made roasted chicken the night before, perfectly cooked, golden, safe. You store it in the fridge. The next day, you take it out, place it on a plate, microwave it for a couple of minutes, touch the outside, feel that it's hot, and start eating. It feels routine, efficient, completely normal. But here's what most people don't realize. A microwave does not heat food evenly the way an oven does. Instead of gradually surrounding the food with heat, it works by exciting water molecules inside the food. And because different parts of the same piece of chicken contain different amounts of water, fat, and density, the heating becomes uneven. This creates what are known as cold spots. These are areas inside the food that may not reach a temperature high enough to eliminate bacteria. From the outside, everything can feel hot, sometimes even too hot to touch, while just a few centimeters inside, parts of the chicken may still be sitting at a temperature where bacteria can survive or even thrive. You can't see these spots. You can't detect them by smell. And touching the surface doesn't tell you what's happening in the center. Now, let's connect that to something important. Raw poultry often contains bacteria like Salmonella and Campylobacter. Proper cooking destroys them, but after cooking, recontamination can happen easily. It can occur through utensils, cutting boards, hands, or surfaces that weren't fully cleaned. If bacteria are reintroduced and the reheating process is uneven, those cold spots become the perfect environment: warm, moist, and rich in nutrients. In more severe cases, this can lead to acute foodborne illness, fever, cramping, nausea, and digestive distress. But what's often overlooked is the subtler pattern. Repeated exposure to small amounts of bacteria, levels that don't always cause a dramatic reaction, can still keep the digestive system in a state of low-level irritation. And once again, the connection matters. The gut doesn't function in isolation. When it's repeatedly stressed or inflamed, it sends signals throughout the body, including to organs like the pancreas. Over time, this kind of ongoing, low-grade inflammation becomes part of a broader pattern that the body has to manage continuously. So the real question becomes very simple and very honest. When you reheat chicken, are you making sure it's hot all the way through? Or are you trusting the surface? That small gap between assumption and reality is where risk tends to live. Now, the good news is that this is one of the easiest things to fix. If you're reheating chicken, using an oven is one of the most reliable methods. A moderate temperature, around 175 degrees C, combined with covering the food, for example with foil, allows heat to circulate evenly and penetrate all the way through. No cold spots, no guesswork. If you do use a microwave, there are simple ways to make it safer. Cut the chicken into smaller uniform pieces so heat distributes more evenly. Use medium power instead of maximum. Pause halfway through to rearrange the pieces, and once heating is done, let it rest for a couple of minutes. This allows the heat to continue spreading internally, or in many cases, you can skip reheating altogether. Cold chicken, shredded into a salad or added to another dish, removes the uneven heating issue completely. Same food, different handling, completely different outcome. And when you begin to look at your daily habits this way, you start to see that protecting your health isn't about eliminating everything you enjoy. It's about understanding the small details that quietly make the biggest difference. Now we arrive at the fifth and final food, and this one stands apart from everything we've discussed so far. Not because it's rare or unusual, but because it combines two different processes at the same time. Two separate mechanisms, both quietly working beneath the surface of something that looks completely harmless. Think about roasted potatoes. You made a tray over the weekend, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside. You stored the leftovers, and now you're reheating them. Maybe in a pan, maybe in the microwave, maybe even with a bit of oil to bring back that texture. It feels practical, efficient, familiar. But inside that reheated potato, two things are happening simultaneously. The first involves a compound known as acrylamide. When starchy foods like potatoes are exposed to high temperatures, especially above a certain point, this compound can form as part of the browning process. That golden color and crisp texture you enjoy come from the same reaction. Organizations like the International Agency for Research on Cancer have classified acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen based on available evidence. What matters here is not a single exposure, but the pattern. Repeated high-heat cooking, especially when food is reheated, can create conditions where more of this compound forms than during the initial cooking, and reheated potatoes are particularly vulnerable. Once cooked and then refrigerated, their surface changes, moisture decreases, and certain components become more concentrated. When heat is applied again, the conditions for that browning reaction and the formation of acrylamide can become more favorable. That's the first layer. Now comes the second, and in many ways the more subtle one. When potatoes are cooked and then cooled, part of their starch structure transforms into what's known as resistant starch. This type of starch behaves differently in the body. It is digested more slowly, has a gentler effect on blood sugar, and can support gut health. But when those same potatoes are reheated at high temperatures, much of that resistant starch can revert back to a more rapidly digestible form. So what does that mean in practical terms? A cold, cooked potato and a reheated one are not metabolically identical. One is processed more gradually. The other can lead to a faster rise in blood sugar. And who responds to that rise? The pancreas. It releases insulin to manage that increase. That's a normal process. But when this pattern repeats frequently, rapid spikes followed by repeated responses, it places a consistent demand on the system. Again, this is not about a single meal, it's about repetition over time. So in one reheated dish, you may be dealing with both: the formation of certain high-heat compounds and a shift in how your body processes the food metabolically. And if reheating involves oil, especially frying again, you're layering multiple stressors into the same meal. Now here's the important part. This is not about eliminating potatoes. It's about how you handle them. One simple option is to eat them cold. A cold potato salad with olive oil, herbs, and a bit of acidity can be both enjoyable and supportive of that resistant starch structure. It may sound unusual at first, but many people find they actually prefer it once they try it. If you prefer them warm, gentle reheating is key. Low heat, just enough to take the chill off. not enough to recreate that high-temperature browning process, and avoiding reheating them in oil again can make a meaningful difference. Now, before you close this video, there is something far more important than any single food we've discussed. If you've been doing some of these habits for years, it does not mean damage is inevitable. The body has an incredible capacity to adapt, repair, and recover. Inflammation can decrease. Cells are constantly being renewed. What matters most is what you do next. This is not about fear. Fear doesn't help you change anything. What matters is awareness, the kind that allows you to make one slightly better decision the next time you open your refrigerator. Reheat fried food with dry heat instead of oil. Eat leafy greens cold or cook smaller portions. Cool rice quickly and store it properly. Reheat chicken evenly or enjoy it cold. Handle potatoes with a bit more care. These are small shifts, but repeated over time, small shifts become meaningful patterns. Your body, especially your pancreas, has been working quietly for you every single day without asking for attention. The goal is not perfection, it's support. I'm Dr. William Collins, and if this gave you something useful today, think of one person in your life who might benefit from hearing it, someone who follows these same routines without ever questioning them. Share this with them. Sometimes, the smallest piece of information, heard at the right time, can change everything. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.